Welcome. My name is Peg Vershawn, and I'm with Cure in Montevideo, and we're beginning tonight with the group Rural Women Leading, and we have a presenter tonight, Erin Wadzinski. I hope I pronounced that okay, Erin, who is going to talk to us tonight about immigration and what we need to know in our community and how we can be a good ally. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Erin.
All right. Well, thank you, Peg. Thank you for having me. So the presentation that I'm going to give to you tonight is a very similar presentation that I give in my home community of Worthington to immigrants who fear detention or deportation themselves. And while I understand that that audience is not you tonight, I want you to understand some of the considerations that immigrants are thinking about as they live their daily lives and what has changed in recent weeks and perhaps in upcoming months. So this presentation is called Know Your Rights. There's a lot of Know Your Rights type trainings out there. The term Know Your Rights, it stems from empowering individuals to know what their constitutional rights are when it comes to interactions with ICE, what they are required to do under law, what protections they have, thanks to the Constitution, and how should they respond if they have interaction with ICE. So that term, know your rights, is pertaining to constitutional rights, frequently as it relates to interactions with federal law enforcement agents. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I do in my day-to-day job at Kivu Immigration Law, what we know about policy right now, what can we do about it in preparation for expected policy changes, what should we understand, like if ICE comes to an immigrant's home, and what should individuals do if they are approached by ICE in public. When I say ICE, I mean Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is the law enforcement branch of the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security consists of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Customs and Border Patrol officers, and then also U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services officers. And those USCIS officers are ones that conduct naturalization interviews, citizenship interviews, green card interviews, and things like that. But ICE, CBP, and USCIS all fall under the Department of Homeland Security. So I am an immigration attorney. I own Kivu Immigration Law in my hometown of Worthington. I could not do what I do without a wonderful team, and they are pictured here in this photo. Our office is located on Main Street in Worthington, which is 10th Street. We are open Monday through Thursday. We're a brick and mortar law firm. We only practice immigration law, and we've been in existence for a little over 5 years. It was election night 2016 that I started getting this little voice in my head telling me to go home. And at the time, my home was Connecticut, where I had moved to go to college and where I stayed after college and started my career. It's where I was in law school at the time. And I thought Connecticut was my home. Yes, I had maintained ties to my home community of Worthington. I still had family in the Worthington area. But it took some time for me to really wrestle with that inner voice, that calling to go home. And it was a couple of years later, finally in 2018, where it was a job offer from the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, offering me a staff attorney position, my very first job out of law school, in their small office in Worthington. And with my husband in tow, we relocated to Worthington specifically for me to practice immigration law. About a year and a half later, I received a fellowship called the Initiators Fellowship, which is for social entrepreneurs in greater Minnesota. And that fellowship helped me launch Kivu Immigration Law. Kivu Immigration Law is a social enterprise, meaning that it is a for-profit institution, but it has a for good business model. And we have a two-pronged mission. One is to provide high-quality legal representation, just like any reputable law firm would strive to provide. But then the second equally important prong to our mission is outreach, education, awareness building, having conversations like we're having tonight to help inform the public about how immigration policy trickles down and impacts our communities. And so this is just very much built into the core of what Kivu Immigration Law is and what we do, what we strive to do each and every day. So there's so much fear, there's so many concerns about, what President Trump is going to be doing. And he ran on a very anti-immigrant platform, and we can only assume that, what he said on the campaign trail is what he intends to do in office. But we're trying to not act on speculation. We are trying to act on what is reality, what is going on the ground. Oftentimes media covers a lot of spectacle stories, but we are most interested in trends, what's happening over time consistently, what practices are changing, and that's what we're trying to monitor, and that's what we're trying to base our efforts in the community on. We haven't seen a lot of explicit enforcement changes. Maybe that's because things are just happening gradually. There's a lot of talk and there's a lot of fear, but we are really putting a lot of emphasis on reality and like what's happening. And so I'll talk a little bit about what it is that we are seeing. To give you some context, there's a lot of talk about we're going to target the criminals, the worst first policy. And that's the idea that ICE is going to specifically target criminals for deportation. And the government likely knows who these folks are that they want to target. Even under President Biden, individuals with criminal history were a priority for enforcement. And enforcement in this context means deportation. The Doyle memo was the guiding force under the the Biden administration on what individuals are going to be the government's priority for deportation. And under Biden, there were three categories: people who were terrorist threats, people who were threats to public safety, and that's code for people with criminal convictions. And then the third category was anyone who entered after 2020. Very broad, as you can see. And so it's not new that the government is targeting individuals with a criminal history. The thing that we saw or didn't see under Biden was orders of deportation being effectuated, being implemented. So yes, the courts were issuing orders of deportation, but the federal government was not expending its resources on making those orders of deportation become a reality and actually deporting people. So there's a growing number of people in the United States with unexecuted orders of deportation or orders of removal, as some will say. And what we're seeing is now ICE officers are executing some of those orders of deportation and prioritizing those with a criminal history. We are telling people that if you have a criminal history, you are a more vulnerable target than someone who has no criminal history at all. Someone with no criminal history asks, well, am I still vulnerable? Well, if you have an order of deportation, yes, you are still vulnerable, but maybe won't be top priority. And you might wonder, well, how does someone get an order of deportation if they don't have a criminal history? Well, when an immigrant comes to the United States and has contact with immigration at the border, for instance, and contact with immigration officers, they get booked. They get arrested by Customs and Border Patrol and placed in a detention center run by the federal government or contracted by the federal government to a private party. And there they are in jail. If that immigrant has a reasonable or credible fear of persecution in their home country, then they are lawfully entitled to seek asylum. Sometimes individuals have to seek asylum while in the detention center and aren't released unless they win their asylum case. In a perfect world, someone who is detained would have a quick opportunity to seek relief or seek protection and then be released and be on their merry way with lawful status here. But things are so clogged up and bogged down that individuals in detention are being released from detention released on their own recognizance and are obligated to show up to immigration court maybe 1 or 2 years in the future, where they will request to an immigration judge for immigration protection or benefits. During that time when they're released, they should be seeking out legal representation by an immigration attorney to represent them in court. There is no public defender system in immigration court. You don't have the right. You have the right to legal representation, but you're not going to be given free representation like you would as a public defender. And if you can't afford it, if you don't seek it out, if you can't get it one way or another, you're going to be representing yourself in front of an immigration judge. Even kids have to represent themselves in front of an immigration judge if they want to seek protection in the United States. Well, if you don't have a background in law and you don't know what kind of application to even file, it's unlikely that you're going to convince the judge to grant you permanent residency or anything essentially, and the judge is going to issue an order of deportation. So individuals who have contact with immigration officers when they arrive to the United States without a visa are on track to getting an order of deportation unless they can cooperate with an immigration attorney and we can step in to try and get them an immigration relief under the law. So there are many people who have orders of deportation who don't have a criminal record, and they have orders of deportation simply because they didn't have access to legal representation, or maybe they did, but their case wasn't successful on the merits. Oftentimes we feel like the immigration laws are not really on our side to create a pathway to permanent residency, or there's not really an opportunity for someone to just simply, get in line for an immigration benefit. But and so there's individuals who have this order of deportation. They're likely to be vulnerable for ICE to target because there's nothing under the law that would protect them from having their order of removal executed. But these are often parents or maybe their kids, or they're people who are working and are society and economy are relying on them as a labor force. I think that if these orders of removal are executed en masse, our communities are going to feel the absence of immigrants. So what can you do to prepare for changing immigration policies? And I think this question is specifically targeted to what should immigrants do to prepare for immigration policies that might impact them? We really encourage individuals to talk to an immigration attorney, not just because I am one, but because they're going to be able to assess what are the viable pathways to permanent residency, what is the best defense to getting an order, what is the best defense from being ordered deported. For individuals who already are permanent residents, meaning they have a green card, they really should apply to become US citizens. Typically, you can apply to become a citizen 5 years after becoming a permanent resident. If you're not born in the United States, you can't become a US citizen until you're a permanent resident first. So when I meet individuals during initial consultations, I'm always screening for pathways to permanent residency, which can come through a family member who is a permanent resident or citizen can petition for you. It can be through an employer where an employer is the petitioner for an employment-based green card, or there are humanitarian pathways to permanent residency, such as asylum, U visa, T visa, or VAWA. For undocumented parents who have US-born children, we encourage those parents to get their kids' US passports because it's going to be much more difficult for the kids to get a US passport if their parent is not in the United States to sign off on the application. It's important to get these kids US passports so that way the kids can travel to visit mom or dad who's not allowed to come back into the United States. There's a lot of talk right now about like what documents should immigrants carry. Should they carry documents proving their identity? Yes. But should they carry documents proving that they are not a US citizen? Probably not. So we encourage individuals to leave at home documents that were issued by other countries. So don't carry your foreign passport, don't carry your like consular ID from a different country. We simply encourage you to carry a form of ID that was issued in the United States. So in Minnesota, all immigrants can get a Minnesota ID and they're eligible to apply for a driver's license. Oftentimes, people will have a work permit or a green card, which is okay to carry. Typically, you just want something that is issued by an agency in the United States. Kivu Immigration Law has created a pretty extensive family preparedness plan for undocumented parents so that parents can make a plan in case they are detained or deported. The plan is essentially for the kids, what's going to happen to the kids. And it's not a scenario that parents want to think about. It's really, tough to put yourself in that position about, the possibility of being separated from your kids across borders. But we really do encourage parents to be prepared and have this plan in place so that their children can remain in the United States where they're likely to be the safest. But that they have a friend or family member who the parents trust to be able to take care of them. A delegation of parental authority is one of those tools that parents can use. It's a document that a parent will sign giving a trusted adult permission permission to care for the child. And with this DOPA, as we call it, the guardian will be able to make medical and health related decisions for the child, can stand in for the parent when it comes to school matters and other situations where, otherwise a parent would only have permissions to, do certain things for children, but this delegation of parental authority puts things in place for someone else to step in as parent if necessary. So you've maybe heard of DOPA clinics. These are community events where there are trained volunteers that will help immigrant families complete these DOPA forms. The forms are only in English. It does require a notary to witness the parent's signature. And so it's best done sort of in an environment where the parent and the trusted guardian together can fill out this paperwork and get it notarized sort of in a one-stop shop. Kivu Law will be hosting our next DOPA clinic February 23rd. It's a Sunday, late afternoon from 4 to 7. It's going to be in Worthington at First Lutheran Church. What should immigrants do if ICE comes to their home? The main points are: do not open your door. There's one thing to remember, just don't open your door. Speak to the officers through the window or through the closed door, but do not open the door. If the door is open, then under law, that is an invitation for ICE to enter the home. But if you do not open the door, they cannot enter. Simple as that. Do not give ICE any documents or information. You can remain silent. You can ask ICE officers to leave, and you can inform ICE that you don't want them to search. They are not invited or welcome to enter the home. It's possible to get all the information you need from an ICE officer to assess the situation without opening the door. So we just stress, under all circumstances, do not open the door. It's important that an individual knows what questions to ask in order to identify who is at the door. Oftentimes, ICE will introduce themselves as police. And they do this because they think that police is a word that everyone knows, no matter what language they speak. It's either police in English or policia in Spanish, and it's a common identifying term. Well, this can often get people mixed up, thinking that this is local law enforcement, local police officers, not federal immigration officers. And we really encourage people to look on the officer's uniform for the name of their own city to see if it's local police. So we know, for example, in Worthington, that ICE officers will not have permission to be undercover Worthington police officers. Worthington Police Department is not going to loan Worthington police officer uniforms to ICE agents. And so we encourage immigrants to look on the uniform for things that say Worthington, on the badge, on the patches and things like that, to know if it's local law enforcement. Local law enforcement does not have the legal authority to enforce immigration matters. And so we, in effort to try and make sure that, immigrants still feel comfortable relying on our local police to be public safety officers and feel comfortable, reporting true crimes to the police, that we were really trying to work hard to explain the differences between local police officers and federal immigration officers. We encourage people to ask, what agency are you from? Say, can I see your badge? And also ask if they have a warrant. So in order for ICE to enter someone's home, they need to have a judicial warrant, not an ICE warrant. That's a civil document. A judicial warrant signed by a federal judge. And on the left is an example of what a judicial warrant looks like. In reality, ICE is not getting these judicial warrants. I don't know if they're not taking the time to ask for them or if judicial officers are denying the request, but ICE is really not getting judicial warrants, which means that they don't have permission to enter people's homes. The only way they're going to be able to enter someone's home then is if the person opens the door. And so again, we have to harken back to just don't open the door. Assuming they don't have that warrant, through the closed door, someone should say, please leave. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to answer your questions. I do not give you permission to come inside. I do not want to speak to you. Please leave. And if ICE ignores that, individuals have the right to stay silent. You can also say, like, I am not okay with this. Please leave. I do not consent to this search. I do not want to give you any documents. And things are a little bit different if an individual is approached by ICE in public, because ICE doesn't need a warrant to approach someone in public. If ICE tries to arrest someone as someone is walking out of Walmart, the person should ask, am I free to go? They should stay silent. They should not give any false documents or foreign documents to the police, and not give them permission to search their person or their car or anything like that. I think it's important that, to know we expect that ICE, if ICE is hanging out in Walmart, they're either A, shopping, or B, specifically targeting someone who they believe to be at Walmart. It's unlikely, I think, that ICE is going to be expending its resources just to do like random checks with people at Walmart. We are afraid of this. It would make a lot of sense that ICE would do this just to stoke fear in a community, but in reality, we're not seeing this in real life, doing untargeted stops or arrests. At this point, we are seeing an increase in ICE activity, but we're seeing an increase in ICE's targeted activity to specific individuals who have open, pending criminal history or convictions on their record and have orders of deportation as well. As I mentioned in public, ICE doesn't need a judicial warrant to arrest or stop someone. They just need reasonable suspicion that someone has violated immigration law. And so it's important to ask, why are you stopping me? Why are you talking to me? Just to verify that there is reasonable suspicion. Again, individuals who are stopped by ICE have the right to remain silent. If ICE was like, saying, I'd like to talk to you, but I'm not holding you here, well, then you can leave. Or if they say, you're under arrest, you can say, why am I being stopped? If ICE stops you while you're in your car, we encourage drivers to remain silent. Drivers should present their driver's license, and passengers can remain silent, and only if there is a reasonable suspicion should ICE be questioning passengers. ICE needs a judicial warrant to search a bag or pockets or glove box or trunk of your car. You can say no, like to these things being searched. But we always encourage people, do not lie to ICE. You don't have to be chatty with them. You don't have to provide information, but don't lie. Do not show any false or foreign documents. This is why we encourage people to leave their foreign passports and things like that just at home. And don't answer any questions about your criminal history or immigration history, and say, I need to speak to an attorney first. So always proceed with caution when you are interacting with ICE. Sometimes ICE will try and get people's fingerprints. Don't give fingerprints unless you're arrested and you're at the police station and they're demanding them. Otherwise, you can say, I do not consent to giving my fingerprints. And say that you need to speak to an attorney before you can talk to ICE. That's totally appropriate. And there are attorneys that will provide legal advice to individuals who are detained by immigration. So that's just kind of a a rundown, a drive-by of, sort of the status quo on what we are seeing with local law enforcement policies changing in our rural communities, and some tips on how immigrants can be prepared if they do have interactions with ICE, either in their home or in public.
So thank you, Erin, and thank you, everyone, and we'll see you at the next one.